Okay, so we just get started then.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So morning everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session today. So my name's Charlotte. I'm an assistant librarian at Glasgow School of Art, and I'm also a member of ARLGS. So before we get started, I'll quickly pass over to Catherine if she's available, just to let you all know what ARLGS is and kind of what we do.
I
Hello, Catherine.
don't know if my camera's working today. I apologise for that. Um, but yeah, so just welcome on behalf of the Academic and Research Libraries Group Scotland. Our remit is focused on local events for higher education, further education and research library staff in Scotland. And we try to do a mix of online and in-person events. We're always looking for new members for the committee and also any suggestions of topics you might like to see this group cover. So further information and contact details can be found on the SILIPS website under special interest groups. So just on behalf of ARLGS, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to SILIPS for facilitating another event for us. And also thank you to Charlotte for organising this event on behalf of ARLGS. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Great. So we'll just get started then. So hopefully everyone can see my PowerPoint screen. Is that okay? Yeah, great. Okay, so yeah, so I'll quickly start by apologising on behalf of Anya, who was initially going to lead this session for us. So unfortunately, she couldn't be here this morning, but she has actually sent us a short message just to apologise. So I will quickly share that with you. Hopefully, I think we tested this before you joined, so hopefully it should work and you'll be able to hear, okay?
Hello, my name is Ania Matuszewska, and unfortunately, due to personal circumstances, I'm unable to run today's workshop. However, having said that, I'm leaving you in safe hands of absolutely fabulous information professionals. So enjoy your experience. You will be able to reflect on SILIPS PKSB. You will be able to reflect on your own attributes and skills. And also, you will get a chance to explore currently available job opportunities out there. So, thank you for your time and be kind to each other. Enjoy the workshop. Thank you. Hello.
Okay, so yeah, so unfortunately Anya can't be here with us, so I'm going to do my best to step into hosting duties. So I haven't had a lot of time to prepare, so it might be a little bit, chaotic, but we'll see how it goes, and so we'll just see what happens. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. So hopefully you can see that again. And yeah, so I'm sorry it's not going to be quite the session that they signed up for, but Anya has left me with all of the information that she was going to cover. So I'll do my best to take over the hosting duties. And we've got a really good panel of speakers today. We've got a couple of practical tasks for you, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussions at the end. And we might get finished a little bit earlier than 12 as well. So I'm sure no one will be upset about that. So Anya had planned on starting the session with this quote from Mark Twain, which says, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than the ones that you did do. So throw off the bowline, sail away from the safe harbour, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. So we'd like you to keep this in mind throughout the session today, whether you are someone who's looking to try something new and move to a new sector, or whether you're a newly qualified professional looking for your first role. So always start from a positive place, because you always have more experience and skills than you realise. So hopefully today will give you an opportunity to think about that. So throughout the session, we're going to explore different types of jobs that exist for information professionals, where you can search for work. And we've got a range of speakers who are going to share their career journeys with you and any advice that they have. If you've got any questions for any of us, then you'll have plenty of time to ask. So before we get started, I would just like to Just so we can get to know you a little bit better, I'd like to do a quick Menti poll. So if you haven't used Menti before, it's a really good tool to make workshops a little bit more engaging and interactive. So it lets you ask questions and create polls and quizzes, and allows people to answer anonymously. So it can be good for including in sessions where people don't always want to kind of speak out loud. So I use it a lot in my workshops at GSA, and it works really well on Zoom, but it works quite well in person sessions as well. So how it works is if you just go to www.menti.com, or if you're using a smartphone, you can scan the QR code on the screen there, and actually just have to quickly set it up first. Let me see. Okay, so if you scan the QR code or go to menti.com and put in the code 63851567, I'm just going to do that as well, just so I know that it's definitely working. And there should be a little thumbs up icon on the screen. So if you could just hit that when, oops, I think I have to go to present first. If you could just hit that when you're able to join, then that would be great. Okay, so it looks like we've got a couple of people. Let me just, I might have to stop sharing and share again. Okay. Okay. So hopefully that's working for everyone. If it isn't, just let me know in the chat and I'll try and help. It looks like a few people have managed to find it okay. So remember, if you're on, just to click the little thumbs up button, just so we know you've found it okay. And I'll put the link in the chat as well, actually. So it's menti.com and the code should be 63851567. So you can copy and paste that. So I'll just give it one more minute. I think that's actually most people now. So if you haven't joined, if you haven't been able to get onto the Menti, that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. So the first question is just asking, so what sector are you currently working in? So are you already working in academic or research libraries? Do you work in school libraries, public libraries, law libraries? Are you maybe are you a student at the moment, or do you work in another kind of sector? Okay, so we've got a few people in academic libraries that are here. One for school, one for law. Got a few others. That would be interesting to know if you want to share in the chat what sector you're working in. I think that's everyone answered. Yeah, if you can put in other just now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about sort of different sectors that are out there. Great. So next question. So are you interested in moving sectors? So are you sort of actively looking for a role? Are you quite happy where you are? Or are you just sort of thinking about it and hoping this workshop will maybe help you decide? Great. So even if you're not interested in moving sector, if you're quite happy with sort of the area that you're working in, coming to these workshops can always be quite helpful just to sort of give you a chance to think about, you know, skills that you've developed in your current role and how you might sort of use them in the future if you were going to apply to sort of progress or just move to like a different institution. Great. So that was just to sort of know who was in the room with us. And the final question is, how does applying for jobs make you feel? So I know for a lot of people it can be quite overwhelming. I hate applying for jobs. It's time consuming. It can be quite stressful. But I know a lot of people actually find it quite quite a positive experience, because it sort of makes them realize kind of how many skills they actually have. Great. I think we've gotten a lot of people that have similar feelings to me, but it's nice to see some positive comments in there as well. So we've got hopeful, creative, excited, also things like anxious and nervous, which is totally understandable. Yeah, Kirsten's just said in the chat that excited and nervous are really, really close and sort of emotionally. So it's a different way to think about it, I guess. Great. Okay, thanks everyone. That's good to know. So hopefully by the end of this session, maybe we'll feel a little bit less scared about applying for roles in other sectors. So I'll stop sharing this now and we'll go back to our slides. Okay, so I'll stop that. Great, so hopefully that's my slides you can see again. Let me just check. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so yeah, before we introduce our panel, I'm just going to quickly pass over to Kirsten from CILIPS, who's going to talk a little bit about the CILIP professional skills and knowledge base. So we're going to look at this again later and sort of how it can be a helpful tool for your career development and when you're applying for new roles, and just a little bit about the chartership process, which you might want to think about if you're looking to sort of progress in your career. So I'll pass over to Kirsten for that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charlotte. And I think at the heart of the PKSB, it really echoes your earlier thoughts about that people have more skills and more knowledge than they realise. That is really what has influenced CILIP in the development of the PKSB. And it is something, although it's very much associated with professional registration, so certification, chartership and fellowship, it is a tool that is invaluable at every stage in your career. It encourages reflective practice and really finding the language to express the whole plethora of skills that you are amassing day in, day out as a librarian or an information professional. So as I say, if you are undertaking professional registration, and when we come to our panel discussion, I'll speak about how important that has been to my own career journey. The PKSB will be at the very core of that process, allowing you to identify where you are, where your strengths currently are, where you want to be, and break down the steps in order to gather that expertise. And that is very much an ongoing process, whether you are starting as a library assistant with certification like I did, or you're undertaking fellowship at the highest levels of expertise. The PKSB is the kind of secret weapon, the secret power, as the slide says, to achieving this. You can see that right at the heart of it, at the core, are ethics and values, because that really underpins and informs our professional practice, whatever role we're in or whatever role we aspire to. So the CILIP ethical framework is key to this, and you'll see later on as we log into our various PKSBs, it will be broken down into, you can access exactly what principles are relevant to your work and why, and reflect on how you are delivering them, strengthening them in the activities you do. The darker blue part of the circle there is professional expertise. So it's quite a diverse spectrum of skills that as information professionals, we are leading the way with, we're leading the world in. So you can see everything from collection management to information use, information management, knowledge management, literacies and learning. Certainly for anybody that is coming from public libraries like me, that was a key area, records management and research. And that's complemented by the lower portion of the circle, the generic skills. Now, don't be under any illusion that generic means any less significant, because these are rather the soft skills that inform our work with people. You've got kind of our work with information, our work with people, and uniting the two. So this is everything from technology and communication, so use of social media, library websites, facilitation to unite people with the information they need, to leadership, advocacy, influencing and personal effectiveness. Of course, at CILIPS, advocacy is something we do day in, day out. So again, PKSB is really critical in just reminding us of the skills that we're growing and why we're growing them. And you'll also see just running around the circle there. So we have, if anybody has already undertaken professional registration or is thinking about it, this won't be news to you, but we have our 3 criteria. You have personal development, you have organisation and environmental context, and the wider sector context. And as you compile your portfolio for professional registration to showcase how your skills have developed, how you're a professional practitioner, that you will be evidencing all three of them. So organisation and environmental context, that really encourages you to reflect on the impact of your role within your wider organisation. So what is being delivered, whether it's sustainability, whether it's EDI, all of the above and more, couldn't be achieved without our library and information colleagues, and it's really showcasing that. So again, you can use the specific skills that PKSB identifies to express that, which incidentally can be very valuable, even if you're not quite thinking of changing sectors. If you're thinking of career progression, it's really great to have that language to identify exactly what your skills are and why they make a difference. And last but certainly not least, the wider sector context. This is all about, I don't think you could be a reflective practitioner if you weren't engaged with the wider sector, if you weren't learning for one another. So that's, if anybody's looking to amass evidence, I think this morning is a great example of that. We've seen even from the Menti, the varied sectors that are coming together in the Zoom room today. So we're learning from one another and learning kind of what skills are constant across the profession, what skills we would like to grow more of, and perhaps what sectors are key to doing that. So above all, the PKSB encourages us to reflect, to improve, to strengthen, and to connect critically. So it's an invaluable tool, and we will be delving into it in more detail very, very shortly. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you, Kirsten. I will admit that I did register to start chartership a few years ago, and I haven't quite got around to it, but I think sort of between moving between different jobs and different sectors, I just never felt like I really had time to stop and think about it. But now I'm kind of more settled and in a permanent role, then it's definitely something I'm going to pick up again, and you've sold it really well there, so thank you. Great. So we're just going to take some time now to let our panel members introduce themselves. So we were going to start with Ania. So you can see from the many roles that she's held in libraries and in the broader kind of information sphere that she has a lot of experience working across sectors such as academic, health and schools, and in roles that you might not immediately associate with libraries, such as accessibility consultant and content developer. So that's why we invited her to lead the workshop today, because she has so much valuable experience to share. But she said that each of our roles have led her somewhere new into something different. So remember that you can always learn new skills on the job and discover new things that you love doing. And that can completely change your idea of where you want your career to take you. So Ania's career tip that she's left for us is to not be afraid to make contact with hiring managers to ask for more details about posts that you want to apply for. So there's nothing wrong with reaching out to ask for clarification of something or for more information, because that might actually help the sort of employer in the future to think about ways to improve their applications. And if you've got a good question, then they might remember you when it comes to the sort of interview stage, and they'll know that you're sort of like taking a keen interest. So Ania's message to you all is to never be done growing, learn even from pitfalls, and to be curious. So always remember that you're always learning. So next up was myself. So as I mentioned earlier, my name's Charlotte, and I'm currently an assistant librarian at the Glasgow School of Art, where I've been working for the past 2.5 years. So my CV isn't quite as impressive as Ania's, but since graduating with my library degree at Strathclyde back in 2017, I have gained quite a bit of experience working in different sectors. So most of my experience has been in academic libraries, and at the moment my role at GSA is focused on providing training and workshops to students and staff. So this involves leading the coordination of our library inductions at the start of term, developing new workshops to respond to the needs of our users, helping students make the best use of the library and raising awareness of our resources, also developing the library's online modules and information study and research skills, and working with academics to provide programme-specific library instruction. So I have previously worked in quite a similar role at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen as an assistant academic support librarian. And in between that and my current role at GSA, I worked as a knowledge services officer with NHS Lanarkshire, which is how I met Ania. So that was a really interesting and varied role, which sort of included day-to-day library work like user support and cataloguing, but also provided research support to the Monklands Replacement Project, which is working towards building a new hospital in Lanarkshire. So that involved carrying out literature searches in response to inquiries from the project team to help them make informed decisions relating to the design of the new hospital and the services that they wanted to provide. So I also was able to work on some other projects relating to things like copyright. And I worked with Ania on building a new clinical guidelines app for healthcare professionals in Lanarkshire. So being involved in developing an app isn't something that I thought I would really be doing when I started working in libraries. So it wasn't something I felt particularly confident in at the beginning. But if you're open to learning new things, then your career can take you in directions that you don't always expect. So some of my earlier roles in libraries include being a lifelong learning library advisor in Edinburgh's public libraries and a school librarian in Renfrewshire. So I have moved around a little bit and worked in a few different sectors. So hopefully that'll come in useful in today's session. So if I had to give one career tip, it would be to not rule out applying for jobs in sectors that you hadn't considered working in, because all experience is valuable. For example, my first librarian role was as a school librarian, which I hadn't really thought of when doing my library degree. But honestly, it was a really good experience because it's a role where you have to do a little bit of everything. So I was managing a budget, developing the collection, doing things like cataloguing, organising events, delivering information literacy sessions, and liaising with teaching staff. So those were all really valuable skills that I was able to develop and get sort of more substantial experience of. And then that became easier to think about how I might apply those skills in other areas. So it was really beneficial, and it definitely helped me when I was looking for other jobs later on. So really my message would be to be open to new opportunities and to learn from them. So our next panelist is Luca, so I'll pass over to him.
Hi, I'm Luca. I'm currently the Sheriff Post Library Service Manager. I work in Edinburgh. And what I want to say to everybody, just to encourage you, I didn't think I wanted to be a manager when I started, like a library manager. It's a daunting experience at the beginning. It was like, I've been in this position for 5 years, and I started as an academic support librarian, as a volunteer in university, like 15 years ago, and then I didn't think that I wanted to work in libraries for a little bit, and I moved in a completely different direction, working in hospitality. And while I was working in hospitality, I did actually manage a lot of information, and all the information I was managing in hospitality, it was actually something that I did use. I built upon all the skills there I built on the skills I had when working in hospitality. And I did a master in librarianship in informational library studies, where I also met Charlotte there. And I kept on building all these skills there. I wasn't expecting, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I remember that working in school in libraries was something I really enjoyed. So I then, after I finished the master, I applied for various positions, and I managed to get a job in school libraries. And that's where I actually start to build even more skills. Like I did a lot of information sessions with children, and invited authors to read, to make kids wanted to read more and enjoy reading, and teaching them how to do research online, how to evaluate information online. And then after that, I moved again to another position, which is the lifelong learning library supervisors. And I was working in a school library in Edinburgh. I moved from different towns and cities here in Scotland. And I kept on inviting and organizing a lot of events with a lot of people. I worked with Scottish Book Trust to organize events for schools. I enjoyed everything I was doing with them, but all the jobs I was doing were contract-based, and I was looking for a different opportunity. So after the contract ended, I was always left there with a little bit of unease. I wasn't sure what I was going, if I could find a permanent job. So I kept on applying everything and on all the jobs I could find. And I just tried to not be discouraged. Like, even all day, if a job lists some skills I'm not so confident about, or maybe I don't think I fully meet the the personal specification or the job description, I still try to look at all the things I've done and see maybe I can adapt something. Like I did do a very big stock check when I was a volunteer as an academic support librarian in Italy. And I thought, well, that's still a collection management. So even if it's a tiny bit and I was supervised, I know how it works. So why not use that as an experience when I have to do the interview or when I put my job application on, and just use everything I do. Or even when I was managing invoices and using a button. I had a budget even when I was working in hospitality, and I had to manage that. So I had to work on spreadsheets. So I had to be very precise in all the information I had there and how I was recording them and contacting the various suppliers. So I used everything I could think of really to make my CV as appealing as possible for the recruiter. And really, like, what I want you to take from all this babbling that I'm making right now is don't get discouraged, and just try to look at all the skills that you have. Take your time, start writing your CV and all the information that you have to give to the recruiter well in advance before the deadline, and then think about it, give it some time, and go back to it until you find out that actually maybe all the skills that you think you don't have, you actually have. It's just that maybe they were in a library context, but you still have them. So that is actually my career tip, as I have down there, like, let the recruiters decide if you're not suitable for a position. Apply, try to apply, even if you don't take all the personal specifications, and don't forget to put all the experience that you have, even if it's not necessary from a library position. It doesn't matter. You will build you will adapt once you are in the job, and be sure that the people that recruit you eventually, well, if they decide to recruit you, they want to invest in you. So don't worry about that. It will be fine. Like, absolutely will be fine. And apply for a job. And if you don't call, don't get discouraged, because even applying for the job, even preparing your CV or the letter to the recruiters, everything you do is still something that you're building on. It's still something that it helps thinking about what you can do. And it's all time well invested. Believe me, like it will pay off in the end. Sorry, that was a bit longer than I was expecting to talk about, but there we go.
No, that was so useful, Luca. I think definitely what you're saying about, like, don't be afraid to draw on experience that's maybe not in a library context, because, everything you're learning is always, definitely something to build on. So on my slide, I just put the jobs that I've had in libraries, but I didn't include all of the, kind of retail jobs and kind of, customer services positions that I did while I was at uni and school. But those are all still really important skills, especially in libraries when you are working with people sort of every day. So yeah, don't be afraid to include those on your CV, because there is ways to make them relevant. So thank you so much, Luca. So our next speaker is Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Joykin. I'm a Learning Technology Officer working at Glasgow School of Art. I'm actually in this next room from Charlotte. So I have had, as Luca and Charlotte also, they've had a career path that's gone quite varied, but mine has been quite varied. I haven't, like Charlotte said, I haven't put a lot of the roles before. I've had my degree. When I started, I had a degree in multimedia computing and video production, which led to the role as graphics operator and designer. And, that has actually, when you say, things build, and the skills that I had from that role really did lead to just, how would I say, a bank of skills I could draw upon. Sorry, I should have said, what do I do as a learning technology officer? So I work with the blended learning team here and library technology. I work across 2 teams. And what I do is I support students and staff with the use of the digital tools that we now have access to, especially that's really increased over the past few years. It's a great role because I love learning new things. I love troubleshooting things. And my career in the library and information field, when I started, it was as a library assistant in public libraries. And I mean, the key thing was, I'm just going to sound really cheesy, but just helping people. And that was where the joy came from, just learning new things and helping people. So in the public sector, that was as a library assistant. And that made me think, what can I do here to, just be more involved, be able to make maybe more decisions, in helping to improve things. And that led me to starting the master's at Strathclyde, which I think a lot of you have also done, in information and library studies. And also, if you spoke to my mom, she'd say, well, the reason you went into libraries is because I did a course at City and Guilds a long time ago. So, but I'm like, no, because you don't want to hear that. So, yes, I started that course, finished that. And the first job that I got out of there was as an information scientist, which kind of feels like going to the dark side because it was with the private sector. And that's just my opinion. And I was there for about a year. And I did not like it because it was so far from the public sector where I was a library assistant working with people, helping people, where the focus, the ethos was about people. Whereas at that role, it was more, I think, about deadlines, profit, and things like that. So I'm not saying all private sectors are like that, but that was my experience there. That was quite interesting, though. I mean, I did learn a lot of things. It was to do with search engines, recommendations, creating thesauri, it was very, my coding skills improved as I had to learn a lot of things. So that was good. I take that. And after that, yeah, I went into, actually, that's a bit the wrong way around, but I was, yes, I left that role. And this is where this might be interesting because I needed to leave. I was like, no, this is not me. And I went back to the library assistant role. So it was actually a step down from a professional role to a non-professional role because I missed that. So I actually went back to the library assistant role, and it was a temporary role. It was actually, whereas before I was permanent, it was the same library where I lived, and kept applying for jobs, got a job as a school librarian. And that also was very useful because, again, it was in the education field, it was different from the public sector. And that helped me create projects. I was, because you're by yourself, you really have to, the onus is on you to make things happen. So it led me to creating projects like a makerspace, coding club, and things like that. So that was really useful for me to develop my skills in those areas. And then a project manager role came up with Slick for a short-term project. But in a moment of maybe some people might say madness, I decided to pursue a role as a primary school teacher, which was interesting, and realized it wasn't for me. So, I mean, sometimes you do things and you realize it could be a mistake or it might not be, but these things happen and you learn from them. So the next role was as user support assistant with Glasgow School of Art. That was my entry level here, and which led me to the learning technology officer. I'm so conscious I've gone over time. And yeah, so my tip is learn from your mistakes, because I have made mistakes and you reflect on them and you move on, and, be kind to yourself. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Amanda. I think that's really important what you were saying about sometimes like taking a step back if you know something's not right for you. So not to be afraid to do that, because I was definitely sort of in the same position with when I started as a school librarian, and there was elements of the job that I really enjoyed, but also so I was like, I don't know if this is something that I want to do for the rest of my career. So when I moved to Robert Gordon, it was first of all as a customer support supervisor. So that was like a role that didn't require sort of the master's degree or to be sort of in the profession. But it sort of set me off in like a whole different course. So it was definitely sort of a useful thing to do. So don't always be scared to sort of just take a side step into sort of something new. Great, thank you. And then we're back to Kirsten. Thank you.
Me again, everyone. Yes, so I can really only echo the insights that the rest of the panel have shared. I have taken somewhat of a scenic route through the GLAM sector to find myself here at Philips as Sector Development Manager. But again, I think what is coming across throughout today's discussion is just how many transferable skills we amass in any role. And also, I think Luca brought this out brilliantly, in your non-professional life as well, and that will get onto my career tip. So just for a very brief overview, my master's degree was actually in history of art. I can dimly remember a moment in my grandma's house where I was deciding whether it would be history of art, would it be librarianship, and at that point I had no library experience. I was worried about channeling myself into something too specific too fast. So history of art and museums was the right one for me at that time, and it was the first time that I studied part-time whilst working, which in itself felt like a really great tip to get that more holistic, more meaningful experience to be working while studying. And again, it means that you come out of your degree program with on-the-ground experience. So I was briefly in a private gallery. And I think, yeah, Amanda, it speaks to your insights. We don't want to be talking down the private sector in any way, shape or form, but I find that too commercially focused for me as well. So when a library assistant role came up, I was really intrigued, and I can recall myself, when I took the car to my interview, I had the book filled with my favorite books because I thought this is what the interview will be like. They'll want to see my passion for literature. And it was not that at all. It was a competency-based interview where give an example of when you delivered excellent customer service, give an example of when you showed initiative and the like. So, but I think I did get a few reading recommendations, reading celebrations in before the end because, you know, it's me. So that was my first time. This was with South Lanarkshire Libraries, first experience on the ground in the library, and it was just the right fit. I think that's coming across in the discussion that it's a bit of a truism, but when you know, equally, you know when something isn't quite right for you, and you know when you've found your kind of professional home. So actually, it is thanks to that role that I discovered Philips and therefore ended up in the role that I am today, because I was very conscious that I didn't want to undertake another master's degree so soon, but I wanted some way to show my commitment to the sector to progress, and that was how I encountered certification, which, as I mentioned earlier, with professional registration, you have certification, which is where I started, chartership, where I am today, and fellowship, where I'm very, very tentatively looking, but certainly don't hold your breath for that one. But yes, that was how I discovered Philips. I attended our autumn gathering conference, and when the membership officer role came up, I applied, and I know that Sean is here in the room, so he can back me up on this, that I was something of a wild card, and I didn't initially get shortlisted for interview. I was the kind of reserve candidate, and it was when somebody else had dropped out that I can recall Sean texting me and saying, because it was we're about a week away from Christmas, whether I'd still be available for interview. So that was a bit of a twist of fate. And I feel very lucky to have got that role, but it has suited me down to the ground. We're a very small team here, and it means that we all get experience with everything. So it's never boring. And best of all, we get to engage in events like this. We get to engage with a professional community. We are only a tiny team of 3, but there's some 1,200 professionals all across Scotland doing such an exciting variety of roles. So we get a little bit of everything. And my role has now developed into Sector Development Manager, which means that I get to have that higher level strategic input into work like Green Libraries Scotland, which is a real passion project for me, and Winspiration, more of which in a minute, because you can see, I think hopefully that it comes across here that my career tip above all is that all of your skills count, and it's not just those that are listed in your current job description. Hopefully the PKSB also embodies that. We have soft skills, we've got very specific professional expertise, and everything in between. And actually there's value not just in saying fait accompli, I can do this fantastically, but value in the growth, in the reflection, in the journey, if that doesn't sound too cheesy. And I've noted here that things like volunteering, caring responsibilities, your creativity and off-duty passions, it's the whole of what makes you who you are that will make you stand out. I know that was the case for me. For example, I'm a volunteer with Scottish SPCA, the animal rescue charity, and we have since devise a Philips partnership with SSPCA about animal literacy, about pop-ups in public libraries. So nothing is wasted, as the other panelists have said. And so my message to everybody today is to thine own self be true. And I put women of list, you are inspirational. And I know that we have a couple of male allies in the room as well, which is equally wonderful. But Winspiration, for anyone who hasn't encountered it, is our programme of feminism for libraries and librarians, because we are a sector that's 75% women, even though we're underrepresented in leadership roles. And it's something that has historically received far less attention than I feel it warrants. And we know the societal pressures are against us. You know, librarians are always one of these professions where we're quite cautious about, we don't want to toot our own horn. It's like, oh, don't mind me, just saving the world very quietly here. And of course, as for those of us who are women, we're under double pressure to do that, to just get on with delivering this incredible work without necessarily shouting it from the rooftop. So that is my call to action to you all, to not hide your light, to shine bright, and to realize that it's the holistic entirety of who you are that is making you a great fit for the roles that are to come. So that is a very brief overview of the journey that's led me here so far. Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Kirsten. I think that was really kind of interesting point you made about interviews there. So it sounds like in that instance it kind of went in your way, but sometimes like interviews just aren't what you're expecting them to be, and that's totally fine. Like so my first interview for a librarian job was like, I was just so unprepared for it. It went terribly, but it was still a really good learning experience because I was able to sort of something I always do, like sort of if I come out of an interview, I just make note of all of the questions that they've asked me and just sort of like think of how I might answer them better in future. So I was really unprepared for that, but at least sort of going into my next job, my next interview, I had a little bit of a better idea of maybe what would have going to be asked at sort of an interview at that kind of a librarian kind of level. So yeah, even bad experiences can be sort of, you know, eventually kind of become useful. So yes, great. And our last speaker is Kirsten Watson.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. Yep, hello everybody. So I've had a reasonably varied career. It actually started before I did my, like many of you here, I did a postgraduate qualification in ILS at Strathclyde. But before that, when I was doing my undergrad in a completely unrelated topic, I worked as a library assistant for Edinburgh Public Libraries one summer. I a bit like yourself, Kirsten, I thought that a library assistant role would be getting to read books all day. It was not that. It wasn't what I expected. I did really enjoy it. My most memorable experience, though, is I worked in one of the two public libraries that in Edinburgh that have a security guard, because it's in a slightly less salubrious area. And I was going to say my favourite memory was one night when some youths barricaded us into the library with a mattress and other things and then tried to set fire to the door. So it was a very interesting experience working as a library assistant, but it didn't put me off working in libraries. But after that, I travelled for a while and did some customer service roles, which I definitely think have helped in my career. Did some fruit picking, probably less relevant. But after I finished travelling, I worked as an administrator for a charity for a while, and that involved looking after charity members and so on, and putting on events. So that was quite interesting. And then I finally did my PG diploma in ILS at Strathclyde. My placement was at a public library. I loved it. I was convinced that my entire career was going to be around public libraries, and I have never worked in a public library in my entire career since then. My first role was as a scanning assistant. This is when I was writing my dissertation for my master's, and I got a role. I was looking for a job. I got a role through a temp agency as a scanning assistant, and this was in a corporate library, so I was on the dark side, as Amanda called it. And basically, it was just scanning paper documentation into a system, and I had to tag it with sort of keywords. So, you know, it did actually use some of my classification and information retrieval knowledge that I had learned from the course. And in the end, they actually they made me a permanent member of staff there, and I became an information specialist. And I stuck to the dark side for a number of years after that. So in the information specialist role, the team expanded. We did a lot of current awareness and research for the consultants that worked there. I was involved in a project to create a taxonomy for the research and consultancy content that the company sold to its clients, who were oil and gas industry clients. You couldn't get a more dark side than that. We did lots of teaching, lots of liaison with suppliers. But while I was there, I did another postgraduate diploma in distance learning at RGU in electronic information management. So that was much more kind of focused really on what I was doing in the role there. Then after being there 10 years, I was promoted to team leader. So at that point, we were a 12-strong team. So when I first started, there was 3 of us. And at that point, we were 12. And there was a manager and 2 team leaders. And I was one of the team leaders. So I had to add people management skills. And so I went on a course to do that, because it's not necessarily something that you'd be able to do without any training. But I loved that. I really enjoyed the people management aspect and managing the team. And I also at that point developed a new current awareness system for the company, and I managed that, and I managed the research service. So I really enjoyed working there, despite it being the dark side. But I do have to say, yeah, working in a corporate library is probably quite different to other libraries. You know, it's less customer focused. It's very much focused on profits, the business as a whole, and everything you do is all about the bottom line. So I did actually end up deciding I needed to leave. I decided I had a bit of burnout. I wanted a complete change of scene. My children called it my midlife crisis, and I decided I wanted to work anywhere but the corporate sector. So again, I was definitely thinking, oh, I'll move into the public sector. You know, I've always wanted to work in the public library. So I looked for roles, just any role. I just needed to get out of the dark side. I can't wait to tell my kids that that's what my role has been described as, a dark side. So I applied for lots of different roles, got a couple of interviews. A bit like what Charlotte was saying, you know, there was interviews where I thought I could have answered those questions better. I think a lot of the times I found it hard to take the skills I had from my corporate role and fit them into roles. One was a school librarian role, one was a public sector role. But actually, reflecting back after the interviews, I thought actually I could have made that clearer, that yes, the role was quite different, but the skill set was the same. So that was really interesting for me. And then I got a job in further education as a campus librarian at Further Education College. That was brilliant. I loved it. It was an incredibly steep learning curve. But because, you know, my manager there knew that I'd come from corporate, so she was very forgiving. I am very happy to ask for help. I'm happy to admit when I don't know something. But the thing that really helped me there, and I'm going to plug this, was the chartership program. So my manager was really keen for me to join CILIP, because as a corporate librarian, didn't particularly encourage us to join. We weren't even called librarians in the corporate world. So I joined CILIP, I started my chartership. And the thing that I found the most kind of almost really revelatory was the mentor part of that. So if you do the chartership, if you're not familiar with that process, you get a mentor. And my mentor was amazing. She was in the public library sector. She was in a different sector to where I was working, but her mentoring of me through that process was brilliant. It was so good. So I have to say the chartership program really changed the way I looked at my role, changed the way I looked at my skills and my personal development, looking at the PKSB. When I first looked at that, I was like, I can't fill in any of this. I don't have any of these skills. And then with my mentor, we went through what I'd done previously, what I was doing at the college. And actually, it turned out I did have all these skills. I just wasn't looking at them in the same way. So I worked at the campus library for 4 years. I loved it. Again, I was doing line management. I was creating workshops for teaching staff, teaching the students. And that was the thing I really noticed there, was how much I loved the teaching part of the role. I'd done some teaching when I'd worked in the corporate sector, but I have to say the consultants there were very reluctant learners. Whereas in college, it was great. I loved working with the staff and students. I loved doing workshops and information literacy. And I would imagine I'd probably still be in that role if it wasn't for the fact there was a change of management further up in the college, and they decided to downgrade the roles of campus librarian. They became campus library coordinators. It wasn't a professional role anymore. There was the commensurate decrease in salary scale. So I thought, right, actually, I think this is a time to perhaps move on. But the thing I decided when I looked where I was going to go next was it had to be a role that had teaching in it, because I absolutely loved that part of the role. So that was the one thing I said, I'm not going to go for a job that doesn't have teaching in it. And that's how I ended up in my current role. Probably should have started with where I am now. I'm now a faculty librarian at Strathclyde. I'm back at Strathclyde. I'm the faculty librarian for the business school. I've been there since 2019 and I love it. So I moved from FE to HE. You'd think it's still the education sector, but I would just say the biggest imposter syndrome I've experienced, I don't know if other people in the room have experienced imposter syndrome, but the biggest one I had was going from the college to the university, which I was quite surprised about, because I thought it's just going to be a similar role, but on a bigger scale. But actually, because the university is much, much bigger, so much of the role that I did at the college library is now done by individual departments within the library at the university. So my role is much more specialised. It's much more focused on information literacy, liaising with the faculty, ensuring that we've got the resources they need, doing lots of teaching with staff and students, which I love. But it was quite tricky when I first started there, just to find my feet and to see how I fitted in with this much bigger kind of library department. And I have to say, being part of a smaller team within that library, the research and learning support team was brilliant. They were so supportive. I reached out, asked for help, really leaned on the other faculty librarians to bring me up to speed. My line manager as well. I did every training that was going, anything that was offered. I'm very happy to admit when I don't know something. So I think that's definitely something to say is, you know, don't be scared to ask for help if you're in a new role or your role's developing and you just don't think you have the skills. You probably do have them. You just need that little bit of knowledge because the process is maybe different. Your skills are still valid. It's maybe the process that has changed. So that's something to sort of really think about. So I absolutely love my current role. There's a lot of teaching involved. So I'm very, very happy with that. And I don't have any plans to move. I think I'll be here for a while. So my key takeaways, don't be put off by job titles. You know, scanning assistant doesn't sound like the sexiest job in the world, but actually sometimes when you're in a role, if you've got the skills, you can then look to maybe develop it further or just to get the experience from that particular role. So look at the skills required, both the desirable and the essential. But also think about, you know, do you want to work for the organisation? As somebody who worked for 16 years on the dark side, don't rule out the corporate sector, but be aware that, you know, their priorities might be different to the priorities of working in a public library, for example. So you just need to embrace that if that's something you're thinking about doing. And discover what you love and what you don't. So I love teaching. I'd be reluctant to move to a role now that doesn't have teaching, but I have discovered I have very little attention to detail. So I am never going to be a cataloguer. So I'm never going to look at roles that require a lot of cataloguing. And basically just take every training and learning opportunity that's going, in-house training, in-house events, conferences. I can totally recommend the CILIP chartership. But even if you don't want to go down that route, look for a mentor within the organisation you're in, even on an informal basis, you know, a colleague or somebody more senior in a different department. Like Strathclyde has a sort of formal mentoring scheme, but your workplace might have something similar, or even just think about getting some kind of informal relationship going. Any sort of training you can go to, and also things like CILIP groups. It's been really great. The dreaded word networking. I don't really like the idea of networking, but I have met so many really lovely people through being in the ARLGS group, going to other CILIPS events, but also work events and work groups within your work. So you might have an EDI group at your work, you might have a sustainability group. It can be worth you know, volunteering to be part of those groups just to broaden your experience and get advice from and help from other people. So really that's all I was really going to say there. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks, Kirsten. I think that was really, you know, really nice what you were saying about sort of how much you've enjoyed the teaching aspect of your job and how you didn't discover that until like quite far into your career. Because we had a comment in the chat from someone saying, what if you're 59 and still looking to become a library professional? Like they're always sort of learning new things about what kind of work you want to do and what you enjoy. So yeah, it's never too late to sort of discover something new about yourself.
Well, I was going to say that, Charlotte, because when I got this role as a faculty librarian, I was 49. So, you know, it's never too late. And it's probably, it's at this stage I've realised how much I love teaching. So it's never too late to discover what you love. Yep.
Definitely. That's great to hear. Okay, just having a wee look in the chat to see if anyone's got any other comments. Yeah, so in FE, it's difficult to specialise in anything, so because you always have to do a bit of everything. So it's interesting to hear how that sort of impacted your move from FE to HE. Yeah, that's true. Great. Okay, so that kind of takes us to the end of our kind of panel session. So we'll come back to you all in a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions for any of the speakers. But you can sort of see from the roles that Ania has put on her slide and the roles that everyone in our panel has held, that it's true that information professionals can wear many hats. So on the slide now is a list of job titles that Ania has been collecting for some time, which show you the huge range of opportunities that are out there and many of the different things you can do with your experience or your qualifications in the world of libraries and information. So you'll notice that there are a lot of jobs here on this slide that don't actually have the word library or librarian in the title. So when you're looking for jobs, try and kind of think big and don't just restrict yourself to traditional library roles. So there'll be jobs like, Kirsten mentioned being a scanning assistant, things like data protection, support officer, digital skills facilitator, discovery officer, information literacy coordinator, scholarly communications officer, and lots of others that would still fall under the skill set of an information professional. So try and look at the whole landscape and consider roles outside of libraries. So no matter what your experience or your interests are, there will be a hat out there for you somewhere. So Ania has helpfully put together a list of places where you can look for jobs across different sectors. So most of these sites will allow you to create job alerts, so you get notifications when jobs that you're interested in are advertised. And there's a good mix of sectors here, including health and academic, public and third sector. So knowing where to search for jobs can be really helpful. And we're going to have a look at some of the jobs that are currently being advertised on some of these sites in just a few moments. So anyone that's particularly interested in working in academic libraries, jobs.ac.uk is a really useful site. So they often have international job listings as well, for anyone who might want to think about looking for work outside of the UK and sort of seeing where their experience can take them. So that kind of brings us to the end of the first part of the session. So I think now would be a good time to sort of pause and see if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask so far. So you can put them in your chat or you can unmute yourself, whatever's easiest. And I think maybe Kirsten this would be a good point to sort of stop the recording.